Ready on Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another BookTube Parasite tag. This was an original tag I created last summer maybe. And this is only the third time I've done it, I think. So anybody who's new won't have a clue what I'm talking about. With the BookTube Parasite tag, the booktuber, in this case me, finds another booktuber's video, preferably a video in which a whole bunch of books are discussed, whether it's a book haul or a monthly wrap-up or anything like that, leech onto it, and then make a video talking about the same books, or most of the books that other booktuber talked about in theirs. Does that make sense? So I have leeched onto an early video by one of my BookTube besties and one of my oldest online bookish friends, and that is the inimitable, the booktuber who needs no introduction, Kendra Winchester. I got to know Kendra Winchester a little bit on Leeching and then Goodreads, and then I started watching some of her videos as well as Simon Savage's on BookTube and came here. And I always remember that Kendra was the first person to ever give me a Twitter shout out and made an extra effort to make me feel welcome. So I love Kendra. She's also a great buddy reading buddy. So I am going to do my BookTube Parasite tag off of her very first BookTube book haul from January 24th, 2017, my 32nd birthday. It's going to be really interesting because Kendra and I, our tastes overlap to a certain degree, and then there's a whole bunch of books that she loves and I hate, or vice versa. So it's going to be interesting to go down the list and give my reactions. So one of the things that I do with the BookTube Parasite tag is once I identify some books that I'm particularly interested in, I will do a little bit of a deep dive, either looking for free Kindle previews or looking them up on Scribd or something, so that I can find out a little bit more and then decide whether I really want to try those books. But that's not necessary to do the tag. So without further ado, let's get started. The first book on Kendra's January 2017 book haul video was a book that I heard a lot about back in those days. It was so popular on bookish podcasts and Leeching. When Women Were Birds, 54 Variations on Voice by Terry Tempest Williams. I heard so much about it that I knew that I would have to wait for a few more years till all the buzz died down and I had forgotten what I've heard, and I have forgotten most of it. But I just remember that the animating concept of the memoir, I think it's memoir or essay, was that the author's mother bequeathed her multi-volume set of journals or diaries to her daughter, Terry Tempest Williams. And it was a very momentous occasion, presumably after her mother died, when she received the shelf full of journals and opened them, and they were all empty. And to me, that is just the most exciting thing I've ever heard in terms of a legacy from a mother to a daughter. As a longtime journaler, one of the things that draws me to this book is that I kept a journal quite faithfully for almost 30 years, and I've let it go in the last 2 or 3. So maybe reading this book will help me get back to it. So I want to find out more about it, forget about the buzz, and just now read some reviews, and I think it's on Scribd, it used to be, and decide whether it is something that I want to read. But yeah, that brings back a lot of memories of my early days on bookish social media. Alright, let's go to the next one, which is a memoir about a movie star. So I already know I'm not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. It's The Princess Diarist by Carrie Fisher. I don't know anything about Carrie Fisher. I know lots of people love her. I don't care. I'm just deeply, deeply uninterested in all movie stars, ever. Unless maybe they were famous in the 1930s. But no, modern Hollywood, everything about it makes me want to throw up. So I won't be touching that one. Can I step on some toes? The Futures by Anna Pitoniak. I remember when it came out. It's a debut novel. A heart-wrench debut novel about a young couple trying to find out what they really want in life. That sounds awful. It's got 3.5 stars. One of my friends, Jessica, gave it 2 stars. Rick from another book vlog gave it 2 stars. Yeah, no, I don't want to try it. The next one is also definitely not a Sean book. It's Hamilton the Revolution. I am deeply uninterested in musicals. I know that everybody in America is just crazy about this, and I don't care. I'm not interested. I'm sorry, the next one is also deeply uninteresting, and that is a memoir about a young woman who has a stroke. I'm sorry she had a stroke. I have no interest in reading a memoir about those kinds of health issues. No, no, no. It's called Tell Me Everything You Don't Remember, The Stroke That Changed My Life by Christine Hyung-Ok Lee. And also Britta hated it, so no thank you. Let's move on to something a little more within Sean territory, and that is a novel, I think it's from Mexico, called The Gringo Champion. What was my first clue? The Gringo Champion by Aura Ixolanen. I better do a pronunciation check on that.
Xilonen.
Xilonen. Okay, I'll go with that. Aura Xilonen. And this is by Europa Press, and they put out a lot of good stuff. I haven't loved absolutely everything I've read by them, but almost everything. It's been on my TBR since just before Christmas 2016. So somebody must have told me about it just before it came out, because it was published in January 2017, the same month that Kendra hauled it. And yes, it is a Mexican novel. It's about undocumented immigration into the States. It has a almost 3.78 star rating. Kendra still hasn't read it, so maybe she and I will be buddy reading this one. My only friend gave it 2 stars, but when I go down to the community reviews, they're all 5 and 4 stars. So I will definitely be looking for either a Kindle preview or some way to check this book out, and I'll be reporting back. So that's one that I will definitely do more of a deep dive on. Next is, I don't know, what is this? Everything is Flammable by Gabrielle Bell. I can't remember what Kendra said in the video. It's a graphic memoir about a young woman who returns to her rural Northern California hometown after her mother's home is destroyed by fire. That doesn't grab me, the concept, but I do like reading at least 1 or 2 graphic novels a year, probably no more than them, so I will check this one a little bit. I think Kendra held up the art, and I couldn't tell. I think it was an arc, and she said maybe the arc was black and white, and maybe the final version would be... yeah, I'll check it, but I don't have high hopes. It is a 3.7 rating. My good friend Lindy quite liked it. I'm pretty uninterested in memoir as a genre. Next is another memoir, Give a Girl a Knife by Amy Thielen. And this is a cooking memoir. I'm interested in cooking. I'm not much of a cook. I'm a little bit of a cook. I like cooking. I like eating good food. I'm not a foodie. But this one got quite mediocre reviews, and Kendra still hasn't read it. I'm not interested enough in food to read a memoir about a chef. It's about a chef. I think it'll just be too much information for me. Don't write a book for me, cook for me! Next, she hauled this book, and I bought it around the same time, maybe. Shelter in Place by Alexander Maxick. And I will say right off the bat that I am going to unhaul this book for 2 reasons. One is it has a very low rating and some really hateful reviews. For example, a Big Al of Big Al Books gave it 1 star. That's all I need to know, really. But the other thing is, he, a few years before Me Too broke out and touched every place in North America, he was implicated in some kind of a Me Too scandal. And that's enough for me to know that I don't want to read them. And that's just the way I read. If somebody is a prick, I don't want to read them. So, bye-bye. I've just marked it on hold on my Goodreads. The next one was some weird YA, and I don't care if it's weird or not. I hate YA. It's called Roseblood by A.G. Howard, and Kendra was cynical going in. I have no interest in even trying it. I have to say the next one I have a problem with too, and that's a famous memoir of the last, 15 years ago or something? Reading Lolita in Tehran, a memoir and books by Azar Nafisi. I don't want to read this book because I don't want to read anything to do with a work of literature that's about a child rapist. I don't care if it's good literature. It's about a child rapist. No, get it out of my sight. There's no gray area. a novel, however literarily magnificent, about a child rapist, I would use as toilet paper. So, moving on. And this is a book about somebody making poor Iranian women read about child rapists. No, that's not what they need to read. So, moving on. The next one is called The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. And this looks like something that I would hate. It's about fairy tales, so no. Next one, much more promising. A novel by Jane Smiley. I've never heard of the novel. I have 2 books by Jane Smiley sitting unread on my shelves. One is her farming novel called 1,000 Acres. I believe that's the title. And another one is 13 Ways of Looking at a Novel, or Looking at the Novel. This is called Some Luck. Oh, Kendra read it after this, and she gave it 4 stars. So that's enough for me, and my friend Lindy gave it 5, and Stephanie from That's What She Read gave it 3. Yeah, that's all I need to know that I want to try it. So I will be doing a deep dive on this one and reporting back. So that's maybe 3. The Mrs. Dalloway Reader by Virginia Woolf. So it's a compilation of the novel, as far as I understand. Let's double check. It's the complete text of the novel, one of my very favorite novels of all time. Plus, looks like a short story that I didn't know existed called Mrs. Dalloway's Party. Lots of journal entries and letters by Virginia Woolf pertaining to the writing of the novel. And then edited by Francine Prose, whose reading tastes overlap with mine to a great degree, a la Virginia Woolf and Mavis Gallant. And so she's included some of her own commentary. That sounds fabulous. I don't know if I would ever read it from cover to cover, but Mrs. Dalloway is a novel that I need to reread every couple of years. So I'm not doing a deep dive on this. I'm just going to simply buy it and have it on hand for the next time that I reread Mrs. Dalloway. Because I didn't know it existed. Hey, well, I'm back. It's the next day, and I hadn't realized how close I was to the end of Kendra's book haul from January 2017, or I might have finished last night, but there's only one more. Before I get to that last book, I want to say some more about 2 of the more controversial reactions that I had to books last night. One of which was to this novel by Alexander Maxick. I have done the deep dive that I didn't do before I spouted off. And what I found about the controversy, the sexual predator controversy, doesn't make me any more comfortable to read this book. But there is very little about it. There's one expose, I think it's from Jezebel. It sounded very convincing. I searched high and low online for any rebuttal, any reaction from him. There's nothing. He doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. And that, to me, sounds almost suspect. Like, can you delete your own Wikipedia page? There's a few other literary journalists that have mentioned the scandal, but he's never spoken to it. So the scandal is he was teaching at a school, private school in France, I believe, and he got a 17-year-old girl pregnant, one of his students, and she had an abortion, and he was fired. That's what's in the expose. Now, if that's true, and it's enough to make me not want to read anything by him, and that's a personal choice. Other readers may have different opinions. But the other thing that I wanted to say, just to give a little bit more nuance, is there are such things as false accusations, okay? And so I'm not going to unhaul this book. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to hang on to it for a few more years and just let the dust settle and see what else might come out. I did flip through it, and the writing seems pretty good. But I can't read it believing that about him, so if I am convinced that it's not true, I will pick it up years down the road. Okay, so there's that. I don't really have anything else to add about the Lolita rapist rant. I stand by that completely. All right, so the last book on Kendra's book haul from 2 years ago was one of my favorite novels, The Hours by Michael Cunningham. And I have already read it. Would love to reread it. Love the movie. It's one of the few movie adaptations that I feel was a complete success. And it's the only Michael Cunningham novel that is a masterpiece. My personal favorite is probably his semi-debut. He has disowned his debut, A Home at the End of the World. But The Hours is amazing. So it's Virginia Woolf is a character. Mrs. Dalloway, if I'm remembering, it's been years, 15 years since I read it. I read it when it first came out. Mrs. Dalloway is a character, and one or two other characters. A woman who loves Virginia Woolf's novels is a character, more modern day. It's just a beautiful piece of literature. Those are my preliminary reactions to Kendra's book haul. So now I am going to explore more. Which ones? When Women Were Birds by Terry Tempest Williams, The Gringo Champion by Ora Shalonen, and Some Luck by Jane Smiley. If I'm able to meaningfully preview the graphic memoir, Everything is Flammable, I might do that. But otherwise, those three. So I will report back briefly on what I find out. Hey guys, so I have previewed the first 3 or 4 pages. That's all I needed of the Terry Tempest Williams memoir, When Women Were Birds, 54 Variations on Voice. And I am just gobsmacked by how much I love the writing. So I will definitely be reading this. It's only 200 pages on ebook, so it would be a quick read, or it's not a long book. And I just want to quote, even though it's not directly from Terry Tempest Williams, it's something she quotes on page 2 or page 5 or something from Tilly Olson. Williams is reflecting on the silence of her mother, who had a bookshelf full of journals that she never wrote in, her bequest to her daughter, Terry Tempest Williams. And she's reflecting on the silences of her mother and her life, her mother's life. And then she quotes Tilly Olson. And this quote just blew me away. Listen to this. Literary history and the present are dark with silences. I have had special need to learn all I could of this over the years, myself so nearly remaining mute and having to let writing die over and over again in me. These are not natural silences, what Keats calls agonie ennuyeuse, the tedious agony, that necessary time for renewal, lying fallow, gestation, in the natural cycle of creation. The silences I speak of here are unnatural, the unnatural thwarting of what struggles to come into being, but cannot. That is one of the most beautiful and moving things I've read in I don't know how long. And I just have to keep reading this book. So, bingo! Thanks, Kendra, for reminding me of this one, because I had kind of forgotten about it. All right, more later. Hey, well, I have previewed the Ora novel, The Gringo Champion, and I don't think it's for me. It has a lot of energy. It's about a young Mexican dude, Liborio, and he wants to leave Mexico for America. So it's an undocumented immigrant story. But it opens in Mexico. He's young. He's maybe down and out from a poverty-stricken family, or maybe no family, I'm not sure. But he's working at a bookstore, and he sees some guys harassing a girl across the street, and he goes and defends her and gets into a huge fight and knocks teeth out. And so it started very violently, and that was one of those buy me dinner first kind of reactions to like just this very violent scene from the first paragraph. But I kept reading, and then he goes back to the bookstore, and I can see the relationship between he and the bookstore owner, and it's kind of interesting, and there's a liveliness to the story and to the prose that I liked. But ultimately, what I know I would not be able to put up with is the prose. There's something about the writing that I already is driving me crazy, so I'm not going to try to read this. He invents a lot of words, and that in and of itself isn't a turn off. It's the kind of words he invents. They're the worst kind of, like, they're nonsense words, but they're so highfalutin Latinate words. He's overcompensating for a lack of education, I guess, and he must have picked up. He's trying to use big words, but he's making up his own big words, and the sound of them is really off-putting. So I'll just read you one sentence from in the first few pages. Books bleed, Jeffy told me when he first met me that first day there in the bookstore, because he needed someone young and super cheap to go into the nooks and crannies of the bookstore and clean it all, help him with everything, scale the walls like a scorpion, to lift or lower textual petulancies, carry anacreontic boxes of volumes, and take them to the storeroom to slow down their wormification, since all books fucking wormify. Be wordaciously phrasmotic to mop, shake, and tidy the shop. So that's just too much for me. I mean, there's a certain charm to it, but I couldn't read a whole novel with this kind of linguistic tick. So I think this is a novel that other people might really enjoy, and I will listen to any comments that those of you who've read it in the comment section below that I should give it a second try, but I don't think it's gonna work. But I was glad for the opportunity to give it a try. Hey, well, let's wrap this thing up, shall we? I didn't bother to go looking for a free preview of the graphic memoir. What was it called? Everything is Flammable by Gabrielle Bell. Instead, what I've done is I've reached out to my lovely friend Lindy, who I first got to know really well on Litzy, and then she came to my wedding in Saskatoon in August. She lives in Canada, and she's actually taking a trip to Japan in a few weeks. And she has read and quite liked this book, this graphic memoir, so I asked her on Voxer for any advice she might have about whether it might be a Sean book or not, and she has given me permission to quote her reply in its entirety. So here is Lindy.
Sean, you asked me if Everything is Flammable by Gabrielle Bell might be a Sean book. And I don't know. This is what I can tell you about my experience. I really like Gabrielle Bell's style. I've read at least 3 of her memoirs. And she has a kind of melancholy, self-deprecating, quiet kind of style. Dark and funny. She deals with mental health issues. And in the particular book you asked me about, Everything is Flammable, that one, she has a focus on her relationship with her mother, which is very complicated. So Gabrielle lives in Brooklyn, and her mother lives way in the backwoods of California, almost like a hermit, and her cabin burned down. So Gabrielle goes out there to help her out because she's been living in a tent. And yeah, so it's, some back and forth across the states, dealing with a mother who's, I think, quite a trial for anyone. She's a very odd person. So if that intrigues you, then yes, I would say go ahead and give Gabrielle Bell a shot. I would love it if you love Gabrielle Bell, because I think she's great.
So I'm still not sure, and that's fine. I'm not going to rush out and buy it or anything. I think I'll just let that one go unless it serendipitously falls in my lap at some point. I realized after the fact that I do have the Jane Smiley novel, Some Luck, on audio by a Scribd, so I previewed the first 10 or 15 minutes, and that was long enough to know that I hated the audio narration. It was so hard to stay awake, that voice. It sounded almost like a computer-generated voice that was meant to sound soothing, and the soothing part worked, but nothing else worked. So I won't be doing it on audio, but I tried to just listen to the prose, which was a challenge. But it's a farm novel, and I'm interested in farm novels, so I will try it, but not in audio. But yes, I will. Now, I have her 1,000 Acres novel on my shelf, and I will try it first. And if I like that, I will go back and try Some Luck. So that is my BookTube Parasite tag, leeching off Kendra Winchester's debut book haul video 2 years ago. That was fun, Kendra, thanks. And this is a tag. This is a kind of a video or a tag that doesn't fit every booktuber's personality, so I hesitate to tag anybody, but I might tag Kendra Winchester. You want to leech off one of my videos or any other booktuber's videos? Be my guest. And who else might take to this tag? I think Natalie of My Reading Days might have a ball with this. I'm trying to think of, it has to fit the personality. So those are the two that come to mind. But hey, I just have to add, Karen of Run Right Reads, this tag totally fits her personality. Karen, please indulge me. But this is an open tag at any time, so please consider yourself tagged. Thanks for watching.